The brother-in-law said, "Take it off," like he was asking her to pass the salt. The auction yard smelled of cattle and dust and the sweat of 50 people pretending not to watch. Clayton Hollister stood in the shade of the livestock pen, his white shirt pressed, his voice carrying just far enough. "That blouse belonged to my brother." Lena felt the words before she understood them. The fabric at her collar. Danny's shirt, she'd taken it from his closet 3 months after the funeral because it still smelled like him. Because nobody had told her she couldn't. "Take it off." The crowd didn't move. Somewhere, a child laughed at something else, then went quiet. Clayton's hand came up. Law. It's not a fist, just fingers reaching for the collar like he was straightening a picture frame. And the fabric tore. A seam giving way, the sound small and final. Lena's arms crossed over her chest. She didn't step back. Didn't make a sound. And then the stranger was there. He came from nowhere she'd been watching. Dusty boots, a leather coat cracked at the elbows, a face she'd never seen in Arroyo Seco. He didn't speak. Didn't look at Clayton. Just pulled the duster off his own shoulders and draped it over hers, the weight settling like a door closing between her body and the world. The crowd fell silent. Clayton's hand was still raised. The coat smelled like work and weather and someone else's life. Lena pulled it closed. She didn't thank him, didn't even look at him. Just walked toward the parking lot like she knew exactly where she was going and had no intention of getting there. The crowd parted for her like water around a stone. Nobody touched her. Nobody spoke. She felt their eyes on the coat, too big, too warm for August, dragging at her shoulders like something she'd stolen. Behind her, Clayton hadn't moved. She knew, without looking, he wouldn't chase. Wouldn't shout. That wasn't his way. He'd wait, calculate, find the angle that hurt most, and use it when she wasn't braced. The parking lot shimmered with heat. Pickups and trailers, horse rigs and flatbeds, all of them belonging to somebody else. She stopped at the edge of the gravel and realized she had nowhere to go. Wade had driven her here in the ranch truck. The ranch truck was Clayton's. Everything was Clayton's. She stood there, the coat heavy on her shoulders, and waited for something she couldn't name. The stranger's boots crunched on gravel behind her. She didn't turn. "Ma'am." His voice was lower than she'd expected, rougher, like he didn't use it much. "I'm fine," she said. The words came out automatic, the way they always did. Didn't ask. She turned then. He was taller than she'd thought, standing in the auction yard, lean in the way of men who worked for their meals. His face was sun-dark and hard to read, eyes the color of creek water in drought. He wasn't looking at her like she was something to fix. "You need a ride somewhere?" "No." He nodded like he'd expected that, pulled a cigarette from his shirt pocket, didn't light it, just held it between his fingers like a habit he was trying to break. "Truck's over there." He gestured with his chin. "Offer stands." "I said no." "Heard you." He walked past her toward a rust-colored Ford, old but clean, plates she didn't recognize, leaned against the driver's door, and looked at the sky like he had all day and nothing better to do with it. The sun pressed down. Sweat gathered under the coat, but she couldn't take it off. Not here, not with people still watching from the auction yard, pretending they weren't. A minute passed. 2. She walked to his truck. He didn't smile, didn't say "told you so," didn't open the door for her. Just got in his side and waited for her to get in hers. The cab smelled like dust and coffee and something green. Sage, maybe, or the memory of it. A paper bag on the seat between them, fast food wrappers, a map folded wrong. He pushed it aside without apology. Where to? She thought about the ranch. The back house where Ruth lived. The main house where Clayton would be waiting by nightfall, settling into his chair, planning his next move. "Delia's," she said. "The diner on Main." He nodded and started the engine. They drove without talking. The road unwound flat and straight, heat rising off the asphalt in waves. She watched his hands on the wheel, knuckles scarred, one finger bent wrong, nails cut short and clean. Working hands. Fighting hands, maybe, or running hands. "You're not from here," she said. "No, ma'am." "We're passing through?" "Working the roundup at the Rocking K 2 more weeks." She processed that. The Rocking K was 20 miles east, a decent outfit, the kind that hired seasonal help and didn't ask too many questions. Then what? He glanced at her for the first time since they'd gotten in the truck. Then somewhere else. She looked out the window. Somewhere else. She'd forgotten that was an option. The diner appeared on the right. Low building, faded sign, 3 trucks in the lot. He pulled in and parked but didn't cut the engine. "You're safe here," he said. It wasn't a question. Safe enough. He nodded, waited. She reached for the door handle, then stopped. The coat was still on her shoulders. His coat. She should give it back. Should say something, thank you at least, though the words stuck in her throat like dry bread. "The coat," she managed. "Keep it." "I can't keep it." He said it the same way both times, flat, Final, like it was already decided. And her opinion was noted, but irrelevant. She opened the door. The heat hit her like a wall. "Wait," she said, and didn't know why. He looked at her, patient. The engine idling. She had nothing to say, no reason to keep him there. But something in her chest pulled tight at the thought of watching his truck disappear down the highway. Another stranger passing through, another door closing. "What's your name?" He was quiet long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. "Cade," he said. "Cade Millard." "Lena," she swallowed. "Marlowe, Lena, Marlowe." He touched the brim of his hat, an old gesture, almost formal. "Ma'am," she got out, closed the door. Stood on the gravel, with the coat too warm on her shoulders as his truck pulled away, dust rising behind it, until the road swallowed him whole. Delia was watching from the diner window. Lena pulled the coat tighter and walked inside. Delia poured coffee without asking and didn't charge for it. That was how Lena knew she looked as bad as she felt. The diner was cool and dim after the blaze of the parking lot. Lena slid into the back booth, the one with the cracked vinyl and the view of both doors, and let the coat fall open but didn't take it off. Couldn't, somehow. Like shedding it would undo something she wasn't ready to name. Delia set the coffee down and stood there, hip cocked against the table edge, her dark eyes taking inventory. 40 years old and she'd seen everything twice, ran this place alone, since her husband crossed the border, going the wrong direction, and never came back. She didn't ask questions, didn't need to. "You eating?" "I'm not hungry." "Didn't ask if you were hungry." Delia was already walking toward the kitchen. "Eating's different." Lena wrapped her hands around the mug. The coffee was burnt and strong, the way Delia always made it, and the heat felt good even though she was still sweating under the coat. The radio behind the counter played something in Spanish, low and sad, a woman's voice asking questions that didn't have answers. The door opened. Lena's shoulders went tight before she saw who it was. But it wasn't Clayton. It was Wade Cortez, hat in hand, his face carrying that careful blankness he wore when he was thinking hard about something he didn't want to say. He spotted her in the back booth and crossed the diner in 5 long strides. Slid into the seat across from her without asking. "Heard what happened. News travels fast." This town?" He shook his head. "News don't travel. It just sits in one place and waits for everyone to walk past." Delia appeared with a second cup, set it in front of Wade, disappeared again. Family took care of family. Wade was her cousin, or something close to it. The kind of relation that didn't need a name to mean something. Wade wrapped his hands around his cup but didn't drink. His knuckles were scarred too, Lena noticed. Working hands. Everyone out here had them. "You got someplace to go tonight?" She shook her head. "Can't go back to the main house," Wade said. It wasn't a question. "Not after that. He'll be—" He stopped. Chose different words. "It ain't safe." "I know. Ruth's place, the back house. He won't come there tonight. Too public now. Whole town saw what happened. He's got to play it careful for a few days, let things settle." Lena thought about Ruth, Danny's mother, Clayton's mother, a woman who'd spent 60 years learning how to be invisible in her own home. The back house was small, barely more than 2 rooms and a bathroom, but it was separate from the main house by 100 yards of dirt, in the garden Ruth tended like a secret. "She'd take me in?" "Already called her. She's waiting." Something loosened in Lena's chest. Not relief, exactly, more like the first breath after being underwater too long. Delia came back with 2 plates, chicken fried steak, mashed potatoes, green beans from a can. She set them down without ceremony. "You're eating," she said to Lena. "Both of you. Then you're getting out of my booth, so paying customers can sit there." Wade almost smiled. "Ain't nobody else here, Delia." "That's because they're all at the auction gossiping about what happened. Give it an hour, they'll want pie and details." She looked at Lena. "You got a clean shirt? That one's—" She didn't finish. Didn't need to. Lena could feel where the seam had torn, the fabric gaping at her shoulder under the weight of the coat. "Lost and found," Delia said. "Back room, nothing fancy, but it's clean." She walked away before Lena could say thank you. Maybe that was on purpose. Easier to accept kindness when you didn't have to name it. He came back the next day. She'd convinced herself he wouldn't. Morning came slow and gray, the sky hazed over with dust that wouldn't settle. Lena woke on Ruth's couch with the coat folded under her head like a pillow. She didn't remember putting it there. Didn't remember deciding to use it that way, but her hands had known what her mind wouldn't admit. Ruth was already in the garden. Lena watched her through the kitchen window while the coffee perked. The old woman moved between the rows of tomatoes and peppers with a patience that looked like prayer, her hands gentle on the leaves, her lips moving in words Lena couldn't hear. This was Ruth's church, the only place Clayton's shadow didn't reach. She took her coffee outside and sat on the porch step, letting the morning air settle on her skin. Still hot, even this early, still dry. The weatherman on Ruth's radio had said maybe rain by the weekend, but weathermen in West Texas were optimists by profession and liars by necessity. The sound of an engine came from the east. Lena's body went tight before her brain caught up. But the truck that came down the dirt track wasn't white. It was rust-colored, old, familiar, Cade. He parked near the fence and got out slow, like he wasn't sure of his welcome, hat in hand. Same dusty boots, same lean frame, same face that gave nothing away. He stood by the truck and waited. Lena set down her coffee. She walked to meet him halfway, stopping at the fence line, the wooden rails between them like something that needed to be there. "Ma'am." "Mr. Millard?" His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. "Cade's fine." "Lena's fine too, you already knew that." He nodded. Looked past her at the garden, at Ruth still moving between the rows, at the back house small and weathered in the morning light. Came to check the coat was fitting all right. And it was such a bad joke that she almost laughed. Almost. The sound caught in her throat and came out as something else. A breath, a release, the closest thing to lightness she'd felt in months. "It's too big," she said. "Most things worth keeping are." She didn't know what to say to that. So she said nothing, and he seemed fine with the silence, leaning against the fence with his hat dangling from his fingers. The coat was inside, draped over the chair where she'd left it last night, but she'd put it on this morning when she first stepped out, before the heat made it impossible. She'd stood in Ruth's kitchen wearing a dead stranger's coat and watched the sun come up like she was waiting for permission to feel safe. "You didn't have to come back," she said. "No, ma'am." "So why did you?" He looked at her then. Really looked. His eyes were the color she remembered. Creek water and drought. Something clear that had learned to survive on less than it needed. "Couldn't say." Couldn't? Won't? Maybe both." Ruth had stopped working. She stood at the far end of the garden, watching them, a tomato in her hand like she'd forgotten she was holding it. "You want coffee?" Lena asked. "Ruth makes it strong enough to strip paint, but it's hot." "Wouldn't say no." She turned toward the house. He didn't follow, not right away. Waited for her to reach the porch before he came through the gate, closing it careful behind him, respecting the boundary even as he crossed it. Inside, she poured him a cup in one of Ruth's mismatched mugs. This one said, "World's Best Grandma" in faded letters, a gift from someone who'd never come back to visit. Cade took it without comment, wrapped his scarred hands around it like the warmth meant something even in the heat. They sat at the kitchen table. The coat hung on the chair between them. "Ruth's Danny's mother," Lena said. "And Clayton's." Figured. "She's been out here 30 years. Raised both boys in that house up on the hill. Buried her husband 12 years back. Buried Danny 8 months ago." She stopped, swallowed. "She's got nowhere else to go either." Cade nodded. Didn't offer sympathy, didn't fill the silence with empty words, just let her talk. Clayton inherited everything, the land, the cattle, the lease rights. Danny didn't leave a will, or if he did, nobody's found it. So it all goes to the family, and the family is Clayton now. "And you?" "I'm not family. I'm just the woman who married his brother." "The man at the auction," Cade said. "He do that kind of thing often?" Lena looked at the coat. "Often enough. And nobody stops him. He's Clayton Hollister. His family's been here since before the county had a name. His daddy was sheriff for 20 years. His granddaddy built the church." She took a breath. "You don't stop a man like that. You just get out of his way and hope he's aiming at someone else." Cade's jaw tightened. Something moved behind his eyes. Anger, maybe, or recognition. "There a law here?" "There's Sheriff Rawlings. He and Clayton went to high school together. They go fishing every spring." She shrugged. "So yes, there's a law. It just doesn't apply the same to everyone." He was quiet for a long moment. Outside, Ruth had gone back to her gardening. The windmill creaked. "The man who drove you here yesterday," Cade said. "Wade, he works for Clayton?" "Foreman. Been on the ranch since he was 19. His mama worked for the family before that, and he know what Clayton does." Lena set down her cup. "Everybody knows, Cade. Wade's the only one who does anything about it." She saw his eyebrow lift, a question he wasn't asking out loud. "Little things," she said. "Things Clayton doesn't notice, or doesn't think to look for. Wade's been putting cash aside for me for months, skimming from the supply budget, telling Clayton the feed costs more than it does. $20 here, $30 there. He lies about when Clayton's coming home, so I have time to—" She stopped. "To be somewhere else. That's not little. It's not enough, either, but it's something. It's more than anyone else does." Cade looked at the coat again, then at her. "Some folks figure keeping their head down is the same as staying safe," he said. "Some folks know better and do it anyway because they got people depending on them. And some folks," he shook his head, Some folks do what they can, where they can, and hope it adds up to something. Which kind are you? The question hung in the air. He didn't answer right away, and she realized she'd pushed into territory she hadn't meant to enter. Ain't sure yet, he said finally. Still figuring that out. She understood that. She was still figuring it out too. They finished their coffee in silence. When he stood to leave, she walked him to the porch, the coat still hanging on the chair behind them like a third person waiting for the conversation to end. You should take it back, she said. The coat, it's yours. Told you already. I know what you told me. I'm telling you, I can't keep taking things. He stopped at the edge of the porch, turned back. It ain't taking if someone gives it, he said. And I ain't asking for it back, so that's the end of that. She wanted to argue, wanted to push the coat into his hands and watch him drive away with it, because keeping it felt like keeping a debt she couldn't repay. But he was already walking toward his truck, and the words stuck in her throat. Cade. He stopped, didn't turn around. Why'd you do it? At the auction. Why'd you step in? For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then his shoulders moved, not a shrug, something heavier. Seemed like the thing to do. That's not an answer. No, ma'am, it's not. He got in his truck, started the engine. I'm at the Rocking K till the job's done, he said through the open window. You need something, you tell Wade. He'll know where to find me. She watched him drive away. The dust settled slow. When she went back inside, Ruth was at the stove, heating water for more coffee. She didn't look up. That one's got weight on him, Ruth said quietly. I can see it in how he holds his shoulders. Lena didn't answer. She picked up the coat from the chair, felt the worn leather under her fingers. The shape of someone else's life pressed into the creases. She put it on. It still didn't fit. But she was getting used to that. Clayton didn't come to the back house. He sent the sheriff instead. 3 days passed like held breath. Lena fell into the rhythm of Ruth's life. Morning coffee, garden work, meals cooked from whatever Wade brought by, evenings spent on the porch, watching the main house lights flicker on and off like signals she couldn't read. The coat hung on its chair during the day and covered her at night, and she stopped pretending that was strange. Cade came by twice more. Once to fix a section of fence that had been sagging since spring, once to bring a bag of groceries he claimed were extra from the Rocking It cookhouse. Both times he stayed for coffee, both times he left before noon, both times they talked about nothing important, and everything that mattered lived in the spaces between words. She was starting to learn his rhythms. The way he held his coffee cup with both hands, like warmth, was something he'd learned not to take for granted. The way he looked at the horizon when he was thinking hard, like the answers were out there somewhere if he could just see far enough. The way he said ma'am when he was being careful and Lena when he forgot to be. She was starting to need those rhythms. That scared her more than Clayton did. On the fourth morning, the sheriff's cruiser came down the dirt track. Lena was in the garden with Ruth, picking tomatoes that had ripened overnight when she heard the engine. Different from Cade's truck, different from Wade's, official, heavy. Inside, Ruth whispered. Now. No. Lena straightened. If I hide, it looks like I've done something wrong. Lena, I'm done hiding, Ruth. She walked to the fence line and waited, her hands dirty with garden soil, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Sheriff Ben Rawlings hauled himself out of the cruiser like it was an effort. He was a big man, gone soft, his belly straining against his uniform shirt, his face red from the heat or the blood pressure medication or both. He'd been sheriff for 15 years and would be sheriff for 15 more because that was how things worked in Arroyo Seco. Morning, Lena. Sheriff. And he took his time walking over, thumbs hooked in his belt, eyes moving across the property like he was cataloging it for later, taking note of what belonged where, what didn't. Just a welfare check, he said when he reached the fence. Clayton's been worried about you. Has he? Says you've been confused since Danny passed. Grief does that to people. Makes them do things they wouldn't normally do. Say things they don't mean. He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. He's concerned is all. Wants to make sure you're being looked after. I'm being looked after just fine. That's good. That's real good. He glanced past her at Ruth, who had come to stand on the porch, her hands twisted in her apron. Ruth, how you doing? Fine, Ben. Just fine. Glad to hear it. He turned back to Lena. Thing is, there's been some talk. You know how people are. Small town. Nothing better to do than run their mouths. What kind of talk? About you and that drifter. The one from the auction. He shrugged, a gesture that was supposed to look casual and didn't. Folks are saying things. A widow and a cowboy, alone together. You can imagine how that looks. I don't much care how it looks. Maybe you should. His voice hardened, just a little. Just enough. Clayton's a respected man in this community. His family built this town. When people see his brother's widow carrying on with some stranger barely a year after the funeral, he shook his head. It reflects on the whole family. You understand? Lena felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear, something older. Something that had been waiting for permission to surface. Is that a threat, Sheriff? It's advice. Free advice? From someone who's known the Hollisters a long time. He leaned on the fence rail, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath. Clayton could make things difficult for you. The estate's not settled yet. Lawyers are still going through Danny's affairs. If it came out that you'd been, he paused, choosing his words, unstable, unfit, well, that might affect how things get divided up. There's nothing to divide. Danny didn't leave a will. Something flickered across Rawlings' face. Quick. Gone before she could read it. That's what Clayton says, he agreed. And Clayton would know. He's been handling all the paperwork. Very thorough. Clayton, very careful. He straightened, tipped his hat. You take care of yourself, Lena, and think about what I said, about appearances. He walked back to his cruiser, got in, drove away slow, dust rising behind him like a warning. Ruth came down from the porch. Her face was pale. He knows something, she said. About the will. Did you see his face when you mentioned it? I saw. Danny wrote one. I know he did. He told me a month before he died. Said he wanted to make sure I was taken care of. That you were taken care of. Her hands were shaking. Clayton must have found it. Must have destroyed it. Can you prove that? No. Danny didn't tell me where he put it. Just that it existed. Lena looked at the main house on the hill. The white walls, the flag hanging limp, the windows that caught the sun and threw it back like a challenge. If there's proof, she said, it's up there. You can't go up there. Clayton's not home during the day. He's at the county office until 4, every day, working on his campaign. She turned to Ruth. Where would Danny keep something he didn't want Clayton to find? Ruth was quiet for a long moment. Then, his room, the one he had when he was a boy. Clayton never goes in there. Says it's full of junk, wants to clear it out, but he never does. It's like... She stopped, swallowed. It's like he can't stand to touch Danny's things. I need to look. Lena, I need to look, Ruth. If there's a will... If Danny left something that proves what I'm owed, she shook her head. It's not about money, it's about proof. Proof that I mattered to him. Proof that this, she gestured at the back house, at herself, at everything, wasn't for nothing. Ruth's eyes filled with tears. It wasn't for nothing. Danny loved you. I know. Lena took her hand. I know he did, in his way. She went into the house and found what she was looking for in the back of Ruth's closet, a box of Danny's. Things that Clayton had demanded she keep, that she hadn't opened since the funeral. Letters. Photographs. A pocket knife with a worn handle. A Bible with Danny's name written inside the cover, in a child's handwriting. And underneath, in a manila envelope, other letters. Lena pulled them out. Read the first line of the first one. Her hands went cold. My dearest Lena. The handwriting wasn't Danny's. It was Clayton's. She read them all. 12 letters, dated across 3 months, the summer before she'd married Danny. Love letters. Desperate, tender, aching with a loneliness she'd never imagined Clayton capable of feeling. He wrote about watching her in town, about dreaming of her, about building a life together, on the land his family had worked for generations. She had never received them. She checked the envelopes. Addressed to her at the boarding house in Odessa where she'd lived before coming to Arroyo Seco, but they'd never been opened. Never been sent, or... She looked closer. The envelopes had been opened, carefully, along the seams, then resealed. Someone had read them before they reached her. Danny. Danny had intercepted his brother's letters, had read them, had known that Clayton loved her, and had married her anyway. Lena sat on Ruth's bed. The letters spread around her like evidence of a crime she hadn't known was committed. Everything she'd understood about her marriage shifted, cracked, reformed into something she didn't recognize. Danny wasn't just kind. Danny was strategic. He'd seen his brother's obsession and moved first, saved her from Clayton by making her his own. But Clayton's letters weren't threats, weren't demands. They were the words of a young man who didn't know how to want without breaking, who confused love with ownership because no one had ever taught him the difference. It didn't excuse what he'd become, but it explained something, the way he looked at her, the way he said, my brother's wife, like the words were acid on his tongue. She heard Ruth come in, felt the old woman sit beside her on the bed. You found them, Ruth said quietly. You knew? I suspected. Danny never said, but I saw how Clayton changed after the wedding. The light went out of him. She touched one of the letters with a trembling finger. I didn't know there were letters. Lena looked at the coat, visible through the doorway, hanging on its chair in the kitchen. Kate had given it to her without asking anything, without expecting anything, without needing her to fill a hole in him that nothing could fill. Clayton's letters asked for everything. 2 men, 2 offerings, 1 given, 1 demanded. She gathered the letters. One by one, she fed them to the flame of Ruth's gas stove, watching the paper curl and blacken and disappear. Lena, Ruth started. He can't have them. He can't have proof of what he felt because he'll use it. He'll say it justified everything, that he was owed something. She watched the last letter burn. He wasn't owed anything. None of them are. The windmill outside went still. No wind, no sound. The air itself holding its breath. Then, the crunch of tires on gravel. Through the window, she saw the white truck. Clayton was home early, and he was coming this way. Clayton didn't raise his voice. That was how she knew he was serious. He came through the door without knocking. Ruth made a sound. Small. Animal? The noise of someone who'd learned long ago that closed doors meant nothing. She pressed herself against the kitchen counter like she was trying to disappear into the wood. Clayton stood in the doorway, filling it. His white shirt was pressed, his boots clean, his face arranged into something that looked almost like concern. He held his hat in his hands, turning it slowly by the brim, and his eyes moved across the room, the table, the stove, the coat on its chair, before settling on Lena. "Heard you had a visitor this morning," he said. "Ben tells me you were upset. Ben tells you a lot of things. Ben's a friend. Friends look out for each other." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The click of the latch was soft, final. "The way I've been trying to look out for you, Lena, since Danny passed." She didn't back away, didn't let her hands shake. "Is that what you call it? Looking out? What would you call it?" "Control, ownership. Take your pick." Something moved behind his eyes. Not anger, not yet. Something older, closer to hurt. "I've given you a roof," he said. "Food, time to grieve. I've handled all the legal matters, so you didn't have to think about them. I've protected this family's reputation when people started talking about you and that drifter." He took another step toward her. "And this is the thanks I get? Accusations? Attitude? You tore my shirt off in front of 50 people. That shirt belonged to Danny. Danny gave it to me. Danny's dead." The words landed flat and hard. "And everything he had belongs to this family now. The land, the cattle, the house." His eyes held hers. "You," Ruth whimpered. Lena felt the sound in her chest like a bruise. "I'm not property, Clayton." "No. You're a widow with no money, no family, and no legal claim to anything in this county." He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "But I'm trying to help you. I've always been trying to help you. If you'd just let me—" "Let you what?" He was close now. Close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive and sharp. The scent of a man who believed he deserved nice things. His hand came up, loss, not fast, almost gentle, and touched her chin. "Let me take care of you," he said softly. "The way I wanted to before Danny got in the way." Lena's stomach turned. "I found the letters," she said. His hand froze. "The letters you wrote me. Before I married Danny, 12 of them, Clayton. I found them in a box of Danny's things." She held his gaze. "He intercepted them, read them, never told me." For a moment, just a moment, something cracked in Clayton's face. The mask slipped, and underneath she saw the boy he'd been, lonely, desperate, writing love letters to a woman who never wrote back because she never knew they existed. Then the mask returned, harder than before. "Where are they?" "Gone." What do you mean, gone?" "I burned them." She gestured at the stove, where a few curls of ash still clung to the burner. "Every last one." Clayton went still. The kind of still that came before storms, before violence, before the worst thing that could happen happened. "Those were mine," he said. "They were never going to be yours. I was never going to be yours. Danny knew that. That's why he took them." Danny stole them. Danny stole you." His voice was rising now, the control cracking. "I loved you first. I saw you first. And he just walked in and took what was mine because that's what Danny did. Everyone loved Danny. Everything came easy to Danny. And I got nothing. He stopped, breathed, forced himself back into the shape of the man he showed the world. "This is my house," he said quietly. "My land, my family. You're here because I allow it. Ruth's here because I allow it. And if you think burning a few old letters changes anything," he shook his head. "The estate's settled. The lawyers called this morning. Danny died without a will. Everything reverts to the surviving family. That's me." Lena felt the words like a blow. She'd known it was coming. Had known since Rawlings' visit that this was how it would end. But hearing it... "Ruth gets the back house," Clayton continued. "For her lifetime. That was always the plan. After that, it's mine." He looked at Lena. You get nothing. Legally, you're owed nothing. But I'm not unreasonable. You can stay until the end of the month, pack your things, figure out where you're going." He paused. As a courtesy. A courtesy. More than most men would offer. And she wanted to scream, wanted to hit him, claw at his face, make him feel something real. But Ruth was pressed against the counter, barely breathing, and Lena knew, she knew, that anything she did would make it worse. "What if there was a will?" she asked. Clayton went still again. "Danny told Ruth he wrote one a month before he died. He wanted to make sure we were taken care of." "There's no will. I went through all of Danny's papers." "I'm sure you did." The implication hung in the air. Clayton's jaw tightened. "Be careful, Lena." "Or what? You'll throw me out? You're already doing that." "I could do worse." He stepped back, putting distance between them, becoming the respectable deacon again. "I could tell people what you've been doing with that cowboy. I could tell Ben you've been stealing from the house, going through Danny's things, taking what doesn't belong to you. Who do you think they'd believe? The widow who's been confused since the funeral, or the man whose family built this town?" He walked to the door, opened it, turned back. "End of the month, Lena. That's the courtesy I'm offering. Take it or don't." He looked at Ruth, his mother, the woman who'd raised him, fed him, watched his father beat him, and never said a word. "Mama," he said, "you ought to think about who you want in this house. Family, or—" He glanced at Lena. "Guests." He left. The door closed behind him. Ruth slid down the counter and sat on the floor, her hands pressed over her mouth, her body shaking with sobs she wouldn't let out. Lena stood in the middle of the kitchen, unable to move. The coat hung on its chair. The ashes of Clayton's letters drifted in the heat from the stove. Through the window, she watched his white truck climb the hill toward the main house. Everything she'd built in the last 5 years, the marriage, the home, the fragile sense of belonging, was gone. She had nothing. She was nothing. Lena didn't know how long she stood there. Minutes, hours. The light changed in the window, the sun sliding west, and she watched it like it was happening to someone else. Ruth eventually stopped shaking, pulled herself up using the counter, wiped her face with her apron, and went to the stove like nothing had happened. That was how she survived. Keep moving, keep busy, don't look at the wound. "I'll make supper," she said. Her voice was hollow. "Ruth, I'll make supper." Lena let her. Some griefs couldn't be talked through. They could only be worked through, one task at a time, until the hands stopped trembling. She walked outside. The evening air was thick and still, the heat pressing down like a hand. The windmill had started again, slow, creaking, marking time. She walked past the garden, past the fence, out to the dirt track that led nowhere she wanted to go. She didn't know what she was looking for until she found it. Cade's truck, parked at the edge of the property, and Cade himself, sitting on the tailgate, watching the sun go down. He'd heard. Of course he'd heard. Wade would have told him, or the wind, or the way news moved through this county like water through cracked earth. She stopped a few feet away. He didn't get up, didn't speak, just made space on the tailgate. An invitation she didn't have to accept. She sat. For a long time, neither of them said anything. The sky turned orange, then red, then purple. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, and another answered. "He took everything," Lena said finally. "The land, the house, the money, everything Danny and I were supposed to build together." She laughed, and the sound was bitter. "Not that we built much. Not that it was ever really mine. What are you gonna do?" "I don't know. Leave, I guess. End of the month." She looked at her hands. Dirt under the nails from the garden, Ruth's home. "I've got $38 in a coat that doesn't fit. That's what 5 years of marriage got me. And that got you out of wherever you were before." She turned to look at him. His face was hard to read in the fading light, but his voice had an edge to it, like he was pushing towards something. "What do you know about where I was before?" "Nothing. Don't need to." He looked at the horizon. "Everyone's running from something. Place like this, people don't come here because they want to. They come because somewhere else got too hard." She thought about Odessa, the boarding house with the thin walls, her father's voice carrying through them, drunk and mean, the sound of her mother crying, the bus ticket she'd bought with money stolen from his wallet. "I ran," she said. "Danny was—" She stopped, tried again. "Danny was kind. He didn't ask questions, didn't need me to be anything other than what I was. I thought that was love." Maybe it was. Maybe it was just convenience. She pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. He knew about the letters, Clayton's letters, He intercepted them before they reached me. Married me knowing his brother was in love with me. And she shook her head. I used to think he saved me. Now I don't know if he was saving me or stealing me. Does it matter? It should. Should and does are different things. The coyotes called again. Closer now. Why are you here, Cade? He was quiet for a long moment, long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he reached into his shirt pocket, pulled out a cigarette, and held it without lighting it. That old habit, that thing he did when the words were hard. 7 years ago, he said. Amarillo. I was working a feedlot outside the city, making just enough to keep moving. There was a bar I went to on Friday nights. Nothing special. Just a place to drink and not think. He stopped. The cigarette turned between his fingers. One night, I came out late. Past midnight. There was a woman in the parking lot. And a man. Her husband, I found out later. His jaw tightened. He had her by the hair, was dragging her toward his truck. She was screaming, crying, begging him to stop. Lena went cold. I stood there, Cade said. 30 feet away, I could see everything, could hear everything, and I told myself. His voice cracked. Just a little. Just enough. I told myself it wasn't my business, told myself I'd make it worse if I stepped in, told myself a lot of things that let me walk away. Cade. She died 2 days later. I read about it in the paper. He'd finished what he started. Beat her so bad her own mother couldn't identify the body. He looked at Lena and his eyes were wet. Her name was Maria. She was 26 years old. And I walked away. The cigarette snapped in his fingers. He let the pieces fall. I didn't help you because you deserved it, he said. I didn't step into that auction because it was the right thing to do. I did it because I couldn't be that man again, the one who walks away. He shook his head. I saved you to save myself. That's the truth. That's all it was. Lena felt the words settle in her chest. Heavy, cold. So I'm your penance, she said. I don't know what you are. I just know I couldn't watch it happen twice. She stood up, stepped back from the tailgate. From him. From the confession that should have meant something and instead just felt like another betrayal. You should have told me. I know. You let me think. She stopped. What had she thought? That he was good, that his mercy was pure, that someone in this world helped without wanting something in return? Lena, don't. She held up her hand. Don't say my name like that. Like you have the right. He stood, reached for her. Get out. Just let me get out. Her voice broke on the second word. Go back to your job. Finish your roundup. Move on to somewhere else. The way you always do. But don't come here again. Don't pretend you care about me when all you care about is not hating yourself. He stood there for a long moment, the dying light behind him, his face in shadow. She couldn't read his expression, didn't want to. Then he nodded, once, slow. Yes, ma'am. He got in his truck, started the engine, drove away without looking back. Lena watched until the taillights disappeared, until the dust settled, until the dark came down, and the stars came out, and the windmill was the only sound in the world. She walked back to the house. The coat was still on its chair. She looked at it for a long time. The worn leather, the cracked elbows, the shape of someone else's guilt pressed into every crease. She didn't touch it. She went to the couch, lay down, and stared at the ceiling until morning. She woke before dawn and watched the light come in like it owed her something. The ceiling had cracks she'd never noticed before, thin lines spreading from the corner like veins, like the house itself was aging in ways no one bothered to fix. She traced them with her eyes while the dark turned gray, then blue, then the pale yellow of another August morning that would be too hot before noon. Ruth was already up. Lena could hear her in the kitchen. The soft clink of a spoon against a pot, the creak of the cabinet door that needed oiling, the shuffle of slippers on linoleum. Routines that had outlasted husbands and sons and every kind of grief this land could deliver. Lena didn't get up. She lay on the couch and watched the light move across the ceiling and thought about nothing. About everything. About a woman named Maria who died in Amarillo because a man walked away. About herself, who lived in Arroyo Seco because a man stepped forward. Did it matter why he'd done it? Did the reason change the result? She didn't know. She'd thought she knew. She'd thought mercy was simple. You either gave it or you didn't, and the giving was what counted. But Cade's confession had cracked that certainty open, and underneath she found something messier. Mercy tangled up with guilt, protection tangled up with penance, a coat that was also a confession, a gift that was also a debt, a kindness that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with a dead woman she'd never met. Lena, Ruth's voice from the kitchen doorway. Coffee's ready. I'm not hungry. Didn't say anything about food. Lena almost smiled. Almost. She sat up, ran her hands through her hair and went to the kitchen. The coat was still on the chair. She looked at it while Ruth poured coffee. The worn leather, the cracked elbows, the shape of it slumped against the wooden back like something exhausted. You didn't touch it, Ruth said quietly. No. You gonna tell me why? Lena wrapped her hands around the mug. The heat felt good, even in the warmth of the morning. Solid, real. He told me why he helped me, she said. At the auction, why he stepped in. Ruth waited. There was a woman, years ago. He could have helped her and he didn't. She died. Lena took a breath. He saved me because he couldn't live with being a coward twice. Not because I mattered, because she did. Because he's been carrying her around for 7 years and I was his chance to set her down. Ruth was quiet for a long moment. Then she sat across from Lena, her own coffee untouched, her hands folded on the table. And that makes it worth less? What he did? I don't know. He still did it. Whatever his reasons. I know. That woman, Maria, you said. She's still dead. Nothing changes that, but you're not. And Ruth's eyes were steady. You're sitting in my kitchen, drinking bad coffee, because a man you'd never met put his coat on your shoulders. Does it matter why? It should. Maybe. Ruth looked at the coat. Or maybe that's just something we tell ourselves, that reasons matter more than actions, that intentions count more than results. She shook her head. I've spent 60 years watching men explain why they did terrible things. Good reasons, bad reasons, no reasons at all. And you know what I learned? The hurt's the same either way. The kindness too. Lena didn't answer. Couldn't. I watched my husband beat Clayton until he couldn't walk, Ruth said. Her voice was flat, empty, the voice of someone describing weather. Every Sunday after church, said it was discipline, said it was love, said it was making him into a man. She took a breath. And I stood there and I did nothing, because I told myself it wasn't my place. That a wife doesn't interfere. That the Bible says... She stopped, pressed her hand to her mouth. Ruth. I made Clayton what he is, me and his father. We took a boy who was scared and lonely, and we broke him into pieces and called it raising him right. Tears were running down her face now, silent, steady. And Danny saw what was happening, and he got soft instead of hard. He ran the other direction so fast he forgot how to stand still. That's why he married you. Not because he loved you, though I think he did, in his way, but because you were something Clayton wanted, and Danny spent his whole life trying to take things from Clayton, just to prove he could. The words settled in the room like dust. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me, Ruth said. I'm telling you because I know what it's like to stand still when you should move, and I know what it's like to move for the wrong reasons. She looked at Lena. That man, Cade, he moved. He moved when no one else did. I don't care if he did it for you, or for himself, or for a ghost in Amarillo. He moved. That's more than I ever did. Lena sat with that. Let it sink through her the way water sinks through cracked earth. Slow, finding the fractures, filling the empty places. She stood, walked to the chair, picked up the coat. The leather was cool in her hands, heavier than she remembered. She held it for a long moment, feeling the weight of it, the history of it, his history, the woman in Amarillo, the choice he'd made, and the choice he hadn't made, and all the years between. Then she put it on. It still didn't fit. Too big in the shoulders, too long in the arms. But she pulled it closed and let it settle on her body, let it cover her the way it had at the auction, and something in her chest loosened. Not forgiveness exactly, something smaller, something like the first breath after being underwater. Okay, she said, to herself, to Ruth, to no one. Ruth nodded, wiped her face with her apron. Okay. Lena walked outside. The morning was already warm, the sun climbing toward another punishing afternoon. But the sky looked different than it had for days, hazier, heavier, clouds building on the western horizon like a promise or a threat. She walked to Danny's grave. It wasn't far, just past the fence line, up a small rise where a stand of mesquite offered shade. The stone was simple. Daniel Hollister, 1952-1986, beloved son and brother, nothing about husband. Clayton had chosen the words. Lena stood in front of it and didn't know what to say. I thought I knew you, she said finally. I thought I understood what we were, but I didn't, did I? I was just... She stopped, tried again. You saved me from your brother, or you stole me from him. I don't know which anymore. Maybe both. Maybe it doesn't matter. The wind picked up. The mesquite leaves rattled. I'm not angry, she said. I should be, but I'm just tired. Tired of trying to figure out who owed what to who. Tired of being the thing men fight over instead of the person they see. She looked at the horizon, at the clouds building, at the land, stretching out in every direction like a question without an answer. I'm going to stop waiting for someone to save me. I'm going to stop being grateful for scraps, and I'm going to figure out what I want, Not what you wanted, not what Clayton wants, not what Cade needs. What I want. She didn't know what that was yet, but saying it out loud made it real. Goodbye, Danny. Goodbye, Danny. She walked back to the house. Ruth was on the porch, watching the sky. Storm coming, she said. First one since April? Lena looked west. The clouds were darker now, towering, moving faster than she'd expected. When? Tonight, maybe tomorrow. Ruth's eyes were on the main house, visible on its hill. Clayton hates storms, always has. When he was a boy, he'd hide under his bed and cry. His daddy beat him for it, but it never helped. He still can't stand thunder. Lena filed that away, not sure why, not sure what it meant. But the storm was coming, and something in her was ready for it. The storm came on a Sunday, and it brought Clayton with it. The sky had been building all day, towers of clouds stacking on the western horizon like something biblical, purple, black, and edged with gold where the sun caught them. By late afternoon, the wind had picked up, hot and restless, carrying the smell of dust and ozone and the promise of violence. Ruth had been watching the clouds since noon, nervous in a way Lena hadn't seen before, her hands finding small tasks and abandoning them, her eyes returning again and again to the main house on the hill. He'll come tonight, she said. It wasn't a question. How do you know? Because the month's almost up, because he's been patient long enough, and because, she looked at the sky, because he can't stand storms. Never could. They make him, she searched for the word, reckless. Lena stood at the window, watching the light change. The coat was on her shoulders. She'd worn it all day, like armor, like a decision she'd made and wasn't going to unmake. Let him come, she said. Lena, I'm done running, Ruth. Done hiding in back rooms and hoping he forgets about me. She turned from the window. Whatever happens tonight, it ends, one way or another. Ruth's face was pale, but she nodded, slow, like she was agreeing to something she'd been waiting decades to hear. The first thunder came at 6 o'clock, distant, rolling across the flatland like a drum. Ruth flinched at the sound, an old reflex, and Lena reached out and took her hand. It's just weather. It's never just weather. Not here. Not with him. They ate supper without tasting it. Canned soup, crackers, coffee that went cold in their cups. The wind battered the windows, and the thunder came closer, and they waited. At 7:15, headlights appeared on the dirt track, the white truck. Lena stood. Her heart was hammering, but her hands were steady. She'd found that place inside herself, the quiet place, the still place, the place where fear couldn't reach. Stay here, she told Ruth. No. Ruth was standing too, her small frame rigid, her eyes bright with something that might have been terror or might have been fury. I've stayed out of his way for 40 years. I've stayed quiet. I've stayed safe. She shook her head. I'm done staying. The truck stopped. The engine cut. For a long moment, nothing happened. Just the wind and the thunder and the first fat drops of rain hitting the roof. Then Clayton got out. He walked toward the house, with his shoulders hunched against the wind, his white shirt already spotted with rain. His face set in that expression Lena knew too well, the one that looked calm on the surface and held something terrible underneath. He didn't knock. He never knocked. The door swung open and he stood there, filling the frame, his eyes moving from Lena to Ruth and back again. Rain dripped from his hair. His hands were clenched at his sides. Time's up, he said. I know. You need to be out by morning. That was the deal. There was no deal, Clayton. There was just you telling me what to do and expecting me to do it. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or the beginning of anger. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Lena. I'm not making anything. You made this. All of it. She stepped forward, putting herself between him and Ruth. You made it when you decided I was property. When you decided your brother's widow was something you could inherit along with the land and the cattle. When you tore my shirt in front of the whole town because you couldn't stand that I was wearing something that belonged to him instead of you. That's exactly what it is. Her voice was steady. She didn't know where the steadiness came from, but she held on to it like a rope. You've spent your whole life taking things, Clayton, taking what you thought you deserved. And when you couldn't take, you broke. You broke your brother. You broke your mother. You're trying to break me. I'm trying to help you. His voice cracked, just slightly, just enough to hear the boy underneath. I've always been trying to help you. If you just let me, let you what? Own me? Control me? Love me the way you think love works? She shook her head. I found your letters, the ones you wrote before I married Danny. I know what you felt. I know it was real to you. But that's not love, Clayton. That's need. That's hunger. That's looking at another person and seeing nothing but what they can give you. Thunder cracked overhead. Close now, shaking the walls. Clayton flinched. His whole body jerked, and for a moment the mask fell away completely, and she saw him. scared, small, the boy who hid under his bed while his father raged. "You don't know anything about me," he said. His voice was shaking. "I know enough. I know your father hurt you. I know your mother watched and did nothing. I know Danny got soft while you got hard, and you've never forgiven either of them for it." She took a breath. "I know you're alone, Clayton. I know you've been alone your whole life, even when you were surrounded by family. And I know that loneliness made you cruel because you didn't know what else to do with it." He was staring at her, rain running down his face like tears. "But I can't fix that," she said. "I can't be the thing that fills the hole in you. No one can. That's something you have to do yourself. And until you figure that out, you're going to keep hurting people. You're going to keep taking and breaking and calling it love." Clayton's hand came up, not fast, not slow. That same gesture from the auction, reaching for what he believed was his, taking without asking, the way his father had taught him, the way his father's father had taught him before that. Lena didn't flinch, didn't step back, but she didn't have to. "Clayton," Ruth's voice, thin, trembling, but there. He froze, his hands suspended in the air between them. "Clayton, stop." He turned, looked at his mother like he'd forgotten she was in the room, like he'd forgotten she existed at all. Ruth stepped forward. Her whole body was shaking. Lena could see it in the way she held her hands, the way her jaw trembled, but her eyes were steady, fixed on her son. "I watched your father do this," she said. "Every Sunday after church. I watched him hit you until you couldn't stand. I watched him call it love. I watched him make you into—" Her voice broke. She pressed on. "Into this. Into what you are now. Mama. I stood there. For 20 years, I stood there and did nothing. Told myself it wasn't my place. Told myself a wife doesn't interfere. Told myself the Bible said—" She shook her head, tears running down her face, but her voice getting stronger. "I was a coward. I let him break you because I was afraid of what he'd do to me if I tried to stop him." Clayton's hand dropped. His face had gone pale, slack, like something essential had been pulled out of him. "You were a boy," Ruth said. "You were just a boy, and I didn't protect you. That's my sin. I'll carry it to my grave." She stepped closer to him, close enough to touch, though she didn't. "But I won't watch it happen again. I won't stand here and stay quiet while you do to her what he did to you." "Oh, I'm not—" Clayton's voice cracked. "I'm not like him. You're becoming him, every day. Every time you grab instead of ask. Every time you take instead of give. Every time you look at a person and see something you can own." Ruth reached up, slow, careful, the way you'd reach for a wounded animal, and touched his face. "You were a sweet boy once. You used to bring me flowers from the field. You used to sing hymns in the kitchen while I cooked." Clayton made a sound, small, broken, the sound of something crumbling. "I can't save you," Ruth said. "I'm too old, and I was too late, and I don't have enough years left to undo what was done. But I can do this one thing." She dropped her hand, stepped back. "I can tell you no. I can stand here, in my house, and tell you that you don't get to do this. Not to her, not anymore." The thunder rolled, the rain hammered the roof, and Clayton Hollister stood in his mother's kitchen, with his hands empty at his sides and his face wet with rain or tears or both. "Mama," he said, his voice was small, a child's voice. "Mama, I know what you wanted. I know what you've always wanted." Ruth's voice was gentle now, tired. "But you can't have it this way. Love doesn't work like that." It never did. He stood there for a long moment. Lena watched him, watched the war in his face, the old patterns fighting against something new, something that might have been recognition or might have been grief. Then he turned, walked out the door, walked into the rain without looking back. The white truck started. Headlights swung across the yard, illuminating sheets of rain, the garden beaten flat by wind, the fence line disappearing into darkness. He drove away, slow, not toward the main house on the hill, toward the county road, toward somewhere else. Lena let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Ruth sagged. Her legs gave out, and Lena caught her, guided her to a chair, held her while she shook. "I did it," Ruth whispered. "After all these years, I finally—" "You did it." Lena held her tighter. "You did?" The thunder was moving east now, the rain settling into a steady pour, the wind dying down. Through the window, Lena could see the main house on the hill. The lights were dark, nobody home. Headlights, again. Different this time. Rust-colored truck, familiar shape. Cade. He parked near the fence and got out into the rain. Not running, not hurrying, just walking toward the house like the weather didn't matter. Like nothing mattered except getting there. Lena opened the door before he reached the porch. He stood in the rain, water streaming down his face, his hat in his hands. He didn't speak. Just looked at her. "You're late," she said. "I know." "It's over." He left. "Ruth." She glanced back at the old woman in the chair. Ruth stopped him. Cade nodded. Didn't seem surprised. Didn't ask for details. I came to... He stopped, started again. I didn't come to save you. I know I can't do that. He looked at the coat on her shoulders. I needed to be here, whatever that means, whatever you want it to mean. The rain poured down. The windmill was spinning now, not creaking anymore, but turning smooth and steady, fed by the storm. Come inside, Lena said. He did. The rain lasted 3 days. When it stopped, everything was different. The land drank like it had been dying of thirst. Water pooled in the low places, turned the dirt tracks to mud, filled the stock tanks that had been half empty since spring. Ruth's garden, beaten flat by the first night's wind, slowly straightened, stalks lifting toward the sun, leaves unfurling, the tomatoes and peppers glistening with a green so bright it hurt to look at. Lena stood on the porch on the third morning, coffee in her hands, watching the world come back to life. Cade had slept in the barn. She hadn't asked him to stay, hadn't asked him to leave. He'd just been there, fixing the fence section the wind had knocked down, clearing debris from the garden, helping Ruth with tasks too heavy for her brittle bones. He worked without talking, ate what was offered, and disappeared into the barn each night without ceremony. She didn't know what that meant yet, didn't know what she wanted it to mean. Wade's truck came down the track around 9. He got out slow, his boots squelching in the mud, his face carrying news. Clayton's gone, he said. Left sometime Sunday night, took a bag from the main house and drove west. His lawyer called this morning, said Clayton's putting the ranch up for sale. All of it. Lena felt the words settle, but couldn't make sense of them. The whole thing. Lock, stock, and barrel. The lawyer said. Wade shifted his weight, uncomfortable. Said Clayton left instructions. Ruth gets the back house free and clear, deed transferred to her name, and there's a letter for you. He held out an envelope, plain white, her name written on the front in handwriting she recognized from those burned love letters. She took it, but didn't open it. Not yet. Where'd he go? Ruth asked. She'd come to stand in the doorway, leaning on the frame, looking older and younger at the same time. Older in her body, younger in her eyes, like something heavy had been lifted. Don't know, Wade said. Dallas, maybe, or further. Lawyer said he didn't leave a forwarding address. Ruth nodded, slow, taking it in. He was a sweet boy once, she said softly. To no one, to everyone. Used to bring me flowers from the field. Wade left. Lena walked out past the garden, past the fence, to the place where the land rose slightly, and you could see for miles in every direction. The sky was washed clean, blue and endless, the clouds white and harmless now. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals, looking for something to eat or somewhere to land. She opened the envelope. The letter was short. A single page, the handwriting cramped and uneven, like he'd written it fast, afraid he'd lose his nerve. Lena, I don't know how to say this, so I'll just say it. I found Danny's will 6 months ago. It was in his old room, in a box under the floorboards. He left you half the ranch and enough money to start over somewhere else. I burned it. I had told myself I was protecting the family, protecting our name, but that's not true. I was protecting myself from losing you, from being alone again. I was wrong. About everything. About what love means, about what I deserved, about you. The lawyer has a copy of the original. Danny filed it in town without telling anyone. I didn't know until yesterday when the lawyer called about the sale. You'll get what Danny wanted you to have. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know the truth before I go. Clayton Lena read it twice, 3 times. The words blurring and sharpening as the meaning sank in. Danny had provided for her, had filed the will, where Clayton couldn't destroy it, had protected her even from beyond the grave, in his quiet, strategic way, and Clayton had confessed. Not because anyone forced him, not because he'd been caught, but because Ruth's words had cracked something open, and whatever poured out couldn't be put back. She folded the letter, slipped it into the pocket of the coat. Cade was walking toward her across the muddy field. He stopped a few feet away, his hat in his hands, waiting. You staying? He asked. She looked at the land. Ruth's garden, green and growing. The back house, small but solid. The main house on the hill, empty now, waiting for whoever came next. For now, she said. Ruth needs help. And she stopped, tried again. I need to figure out where here is before I decide where there should be. He nodded, didn't push. What about you? She asked. Job's done at the Rocking K. Usually move on about now. Usually. He looked at her, creekwater eyes, steady and patient. Usually, he agreed. The hawk cried overhead. The windmill turned, smooth, steady, a different sound than before. Not creaking anymore, just moving. Ruth's voice drifted from the porch. Some folks carry what ain't theirs to carry, and some come along just to help set it down. Lena looked at the coat on her shoulders, worn now, weathered, the leather softened by rain and sun and the shape of her body. It fit better than it used to. Or maybe she'd just grown into it. She turned toward the house. Cade fell into step beside her. Not leading, not following, just there. The clouds drifted east. The garden glistened. Somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark sang the first notes of a song it would finish later. Lena didn't know what happened next. Neither did he. But for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough.